We are continuing in our series of the Caribbean Zone of Peace or Zone of War series. Very important that we continue this series. Now, the title of my video has been affirmed Zone of Peace or Zone of War. U.S. drones or drone kills Trinidad fishermen. That's two Trinidadian fishermen, Caribbean on edge. Now, this is a very dangerous precedence. And I did warn the Trinidadians that you have to be careful because when the United States is waging its war of aggression against Venezuela, Trinidadians will be caught in the web. And right now, two of their citizens, because they were traveling on a boat, on a fishing boat from Venezuela back to Trinidad, that the United States intercepted and actually struck. It resulted in the death of two Trinidadian citizens. And this is what is going to happen. And if this precedence if it continues, if it is ever set in stone, it also means that the United States can even strike Trinidadian territory because the United States is now deeming drug traffickers to be enemy combatants. That means that they can strike them anywhere because it is their alleged, what you call it now, agenda, according to Trump, to eradicate drug traffickers from the region. I don't know how they are going to do that when they are the ones who control the same drug trafficking network. Okay, but we understand what the imperial ambitions of the United States are. We understand. And I'm hoping that you are looking and you are thinking about these matters very seriously. Don't think that this is a war on Venezuela per se. This is a war on you and your children and your grandchildren and future posterity. I hope you understand that. This is a war on you. We are the enemies. We are the enemy combatants. Anybody who speaks against U.S. imperialism will be deemed eventually as an enemy combatant. And I wouldn't say eventually, they're beginning to show signs that that is what they're going to do, but they're using other fronts to suggest that it's drug trafficking, and they present lots of enemies. It was first the Al-Qaeda and the Muslims, and now we have the war being taken to the Caribbean, where we are now the enemies because we have drug trafficking and drug traffickers in the region. Very important that you begin to use your head and see what is happening in the world. Two Trinidadian fishermen are dead after U.S. drone strike on boats traveling from Venezuela, and Caricom remains silent. The shocking event challenges the idea of the Caricom the Caribbean as a zone of peace, from U.S. warships in regional waters to Grenada's airport being eyed for radar operations. Washington's military footprint is expanding fast. Former Jamaican Prime Minister P.J. Patterson warned that U.S. actions are dangerous, but Caribbean leaders have said nothing, absolutely nothing. And the current chairman of Caricom is Jamaica's Prime Minister, Dr. Andrew Holness, and he has uttered not a word. And we must understand that he met with Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, early on this year. So we don't know what they discussed in secret in private places, and he's mum on the matter. Why is he so silent on the matter as the chairman of Caricom? Something that, is quite unsettling and of grave concern to all well-thinking and conscious people. Okay? Are we witnessing the end of the Caribbean neutrality and the beginning of a zone of war? In this video, I will expose the growing U.S. militarization of the Caribbean and its deadly consequences. The topics that will be covered: the drone strikes that killed two Trinidadians, U.S. warships and radar bases in the Caribbean, Caricom's silence and Venezuela's reaction, what this means for Caribbean independence and peace. Very important that we begin to look at these very important matters. Now, if the Caribbean is a zone of peace, why are U.S. drones killing our people? Are we witnessing the U.S. militarization of the Caribbean? And these are some of the questions that we should be asking. Now, from Haiti was undergoing its problem, the fact that the president was murdered and nothing happened, and then we had subsequent intervention programs in Haiti, including Caricom being involved in the militarization of Haiti. I was already sounding the alarm that if we are not careful, that we are going to be caught up in a similar position. I was already sounding that alarm on my Rumination with Andrew channel. And all of you here on Caribbean Latin American News, go over to my Rumination with Andrew channel. I do post a lot of things also very important to Caribbean, and the Trinidadians are very, very much active on that channel. So I'll also ask all of you who are on this channel to go over there, subscribe, and please interact as much with my work. I also have another channel too, at the Andrew Tucker TV channel, and I post also quite frequently there. So if you don't get any post notification, go over there and also interact with my other videos, because lots of things are happening and I have to speak on them. Very important that you understand that. So, okay, so we have the U.S. militarization now being used as a footprint. That U.S. militarization footprint is now being expanded in the Caribbean. Okay, and we're seeing now that the warships that we're seeing in the Southern Caribbean waters are not just to attack Venezuela. The United States is going to use one stone to kill several birds, if not many birds. And one of those many birds will be the militarization of the region, of the Caribbean and Latin American region. That is one of the agendas. It is oil, yes, but it is also the militarization. They have been doing that for many years, and many people have not been seeing that, have not recognized what was happening, but now it is reaching a crescendo, and at the level of which our people are now dying, or in the process of dying, or their lives are being threatened. So now we're beginning to pay some attention. Now, the fact that Grenada has also been asked to host a radar systems at its airport, at the Maurice Bishop International Airport, is something that should be alarming. And we're hearing now that Maurice Bishop, but the President Mitchell, the Prime Minister Mitchell of Grenada, has said no, or is about to decide. Remember now that they have to show you a public posture in which they will posture and postulate what they want you to hear. But behind the scenes, they have to do what the United States wishes them to do. So I'm seeing a lot of sensational videos online, and you are interacting with them. Oh, Antigua is saying no, Grenada is saying no. It doesn't work like that. Okay? It doesn't work like that to titivate your little imagination. Right? Because the United States will impose sanctions on these countries. And are you willing to suffer the way in which the Cubans are suffering? Are you willing to do that when the United States will put or impose sanctions on countries, economic, political, military, whatever sanctions that they have? But economic sanctions are their favorite, because that is what makes the people suffer. Okay? And when you suffer, then you begin to blame your leaders. Okay? Now, Prime Minister PJ Patterson is warning the Caribbean against the U.S. warships, and he thinks that the U.S. warships are dangerous, and Caricom leaders are silent, and they need to address the matters. If 2 citizens are killed by a foreign drone, shouldn't Caricom demand answers? And you're talking about citizens of a country who is not, or which is not at war. The Trinidadians are not at war against anyone. So why should the United States? Because it's saying, okay, they were in Venezuelan waters, heading back to Trinidad, and and the United States can just say, oh, they were involved in drugs, without any due process. Without any due process. Now, this is something that should alarm us, and something that against which we should speak out. Okay? Now, we have the implications for us when we look at the fact that Trinidad isn't alone. Any Caribbean country could be next. The Grenada could see the military bases being used there, or the United States using Grenada as a military base. Guyana, it's the rising oil presence there. We can see that the U.S. interest, and in fact, there is a Bank of America in Guyana right now as we speak. And I was reading earlier on, I think it was last month, that the United States has sent also Marines there to protect the oil fields, oil and gas fields in Guyana. Okay, Barbados and Jamaica. We know that, we have IMF deals right now, IMF agreement loans, structural agreement loans. So if we go against anything the US dictates, it can also affect our IMF agreement loans and terms and conditions. I want you to understand that, because militarism is not only militarism in its raw form in terms of having military, it also is reflected through economic policies. Okay, hope you understand that. So Venezuela will likely see this as a provocation, and they might retaliate. And, if they retaliate, remember now that war does not discriminate. So if bombings begin to happen, an entire Trinidadian city might be decimated or town. Okay? We have to understand this. Okay? And what is happening to this situation is dividing the Caribbean. It's dividing the Caribbean. And I say this morning, I was speaking to a friend of mine from Barbados, and I mentioned to him that Patterson as the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, this is going to haunt her for life. The fact that 2 of her Trinidadian citizens have been killed, and not that she's responsible for their death. I'm not saying that she is responsible for their death, but I'm suggesting that she supported verbally that, drug traffickers should be killed violently. How could she say something like that, understanding that the United States has not exercised due process? Isn't she a lawyer too? If I read correctly, I think Patterson is a lawyer, is a professional lawyer. Okay? I know she's also a teacher, but I think she also pursued a career in the legal profession. Okay, so she, of all persons, should understand that we need due process. So even if you intercept them, you should allow them to go before a court of law. But this is not how the United States operates, and diplomacy is a thing of the past. I hope you understand that. Okay, so these 2 Caribbean lives have been lost. When Caribbean citizens die under US fire and our leaders say nothing, peace is no longer real. It's just a slogan. Let me repeat that. When Caribbean citizens die under US fire and our leaders say nothing, peace is no longer real. It's just a slogan. Should Caricom confront the US over this drone strike? Okay, I think we should, or Caricom should. Thank you so much for joining. I hope you'd like, share, and subscribe for more real Caribbean perspectives. And I would say real Caribbean and global perspectives, because I am, in fact, global. I don't believe in globalism, but I give you a global perspective of what is happening in the region. Thank you so much for joining, and see you in another video. Hasta entonces, or as the Brazilians would say, até logo.